Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Veg Networking Canada, where vegan plant-based companies connect and collaborate. We acknowledge, honor, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Today, we have a special guest with us, a nearly 30-year vegan and also a nearly 30-year entrepreneur with a long track record of leadership and building teams, a passionate fine dining restaurateur on a mission to make vegan food so unveganly delicious. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the founder of Avelo Restaurant and Bar Avelo. Welcome, Roger Yang.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you for that really nice introduction too. That was I feel really good.
Well, thank you for joining us. And for everybody who's going to be listening, can you tell everybody a little bit more about the story of what led you to actually go vegan so long ago?
Yeah, for sure. I think just growing up as a kid, I just felt it was, I don't know, just felt uncomfortable with the idea of eating animals. So when I started living on my own, um, I just decided to stop eating animals. And then I figured I should read something about vegetarianism since I became one. I should learn something about it. Then I started reading about the egg industry and dairy industry and like how horrible those can be. And yeah, then I became vegan. It's funny because back then it wasn't a very common word. I didn't know what it was until basically I was vegan. So yeah, since then been vegan all the time.
Well, that's refreshing. You hear a lot of people who are, which is, there's absolutely, of course, nothing wrong with this. If anything, we want this type of curiosity of people who want to maybe transition to becoming vegan and this and that. And then they're looking for resources to help them along that journey. And it's refreshing and interesting to almost absorb those resources and everything after the fact. So that's a very interesting perspective we don't come across a lot. So switching gears a little bit, in terms of entrepreneurship, we mentioned at the beginning, vegan almost 30 years. You've been an entrepreneur a little bit longer than you've been vegan, which is almost 30 years. I believe it's like 29 years. So what is your entrepreneur origin story? How did that start? How did that unfold?
Yeah, the I think it's because I got really bored in university. I only stayed for one semester and did a couple of odd jobs. And I started my first company when I was 19. Um, I got into the telecommunications industry. I learned some things about that, some useful information, and started doing consulting for bigger companies on how to manage their telecommunications costs. And over the years, I grew that into a more sustainable, more mature company. It's pretty solid now. And yeah, I built up the team over those years to the point where I wasn't really needed anymore. So I kind of put myself out of a job. So I sort of retired the first time there. Spent a couple of years traveling around the world, exploring different places, cultures, and food, of course. And then when I got back to Toronto, um, I got in touch with the chef I'd known for a while, um, and we decided to open a restaurant. So that's how I got into food. I'd kind of been wanting to do something with veganism as a career for a while before that, and that was a good opportunity to start with that.
Was that restaurant that you opened, was it a vegan establishment?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like the predecessor of Avelo. It was called Awai, and it was also a tasting menu, fine dining kind of upscale restaurant. And at the time, there wasn't really much. This was 2016, so there wasn't really much in terms of upscale vegan restaurants at all, and we weren't really sure how well it would go. So it was just like a 1 year lease and ended up being 2.5 years. And yeah, we did quite well. We got the Toronto Star critic back when they had restaurant critics wrote that at the time it was the best vegan restaurant in the city. We got a lot of attention. It was great. I got involved a lot more than I was expecting to. And yeah, and so that evolved into Avelo today, which is in a Victorian house. It's a very small, intimate space, and we do the tasting menu. So instead of having a published menu and people choose from that, Our servers come and bring food to the table, explain what these ingredients are, how it's prepared. So it's like a surprise, basically, every single dish. And yeah, it's a fun experience.
So a few things come up. First, for those of you who have not been yet, I would encourage you to of course, go and visit if you're able to. And if you're in a location where you necessarily can't right now, I would encourage you to look at the photos of what Avelo looked like before and what it looks like after. Quite a remarkable transformation indeed, I think. So your brand is Avelo Restaurant, and correct us if we're wrong, but then upstairs as well, there's Bar Avelo. So is that right?
Yeah, yeah, we just opened the bar in last fall. It was actually planned to be open in March 2020, but of course that didn't end up happening. So we finally got back to the original plan, and yeah, it's focused on cocktails, and there's an a la carte menu, so it's a little bit more casual, um, and people can come in just for drinks or just for some food. And yeah, also a lot of fun. The it's very small, just 6 tables, 5 bar stools. So again, it's a more intimate experience, and it's in a little townhouse on a quiet street. If you were walking by, you wouldn't even notice that there's a restaurant there, much less another bar upstairs. So it's kind of like this hidden secret.
Very New York City, if I may. Um, so where is your brand going in the future?
Um, I am going to build a vegan town. So not just restaurants, but condos, hotels, and yeah, I was in Costa Rica and realizing that there's very few vegan restaurants, which was really surprising because the kind of people who come to the country are very eco-conscious. They come there to see nature, wildlife, and you see a lot of restaurants have like a vegan menu, or a lot of things are marked vegan, which is really nice. It's much more than you'd expect in many other places outside of major cities. But there's like almost no vegan restaurants. It's really strange. So I started thinking about this, and actually one of our chefs from Avelo is from Costa Rica, and I started thinking we can actually have more impact in Costa Rica serving tourists than we can in Toronto. There's the kind of crowd that goes to Costa Rica is just perfect kind of the people that we want. Not just the vegans and vegetarians, but people who are open to more plant-based foods, people who are eco-conscious, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a constant stream of people coming into the country. So then I started looking for real estate, like where would we put a restaurant, and eventually started looking into different sites, different plots of land. And then I came across this beachfront land that's 40 acres, this large piece in a beautiful location. I thought, like, wow, we can do so much more than restaurants here. So we started planning a walkable town with no cars, uh, the trees everywhere, basically all the space that would be taken up by cars, parking, and everything. We can plant more trees that grow food. Trees on rooftops, plants even on the sides of buildings. It's actually possible to have more plants on buildings in total than if the land was just left bare or just left by nature to grow random trees. So yeah, so it's very exciting. We're going beyond just a meal into a full experience of stay for a few days, enjoy this beautiful town where you don't need a car, you don't need to drive a big SUV or 4x4 out to dinner. You can walk around with all the trees and the oxygen. Um, yeah, so that's that's what I'm working on now. And then another site that I'm considering is just outside of the cloud forest, and it's this currently used as a ranch for cows. There's 600 acres of pasture, an acre for us city folk who are used to much smaller pieces of land. An acre is about a football field, and there's only 250 cows on it. So you basically need more than 2 acres for each cow, which is like a crazy amount of land. And seeing that in person, even like I know some of the statistics about how much land cows take, et cetera, et cetera. But seeing that in person is just shocking to to take that in and just see how vast that is. So the plan would be to reforest this area with food forest and some sustainable housing. So it's really interesting opportunity to make actually pretty big impact on CO2, on reforestation, and a model for how we humans can live more in tune with nature, how it can be a really enjoyable place. Um, and of course, all the food would be vegan.
Well, there's a term out there called a BHAG or a big, hairy, audacious goal, and they are always thrilling and exciting to hear, especially when they have such a magnificent ability to impact the world positively through veganism and things associated with it. So that sounds absolutely incredible and no small feat to achieve. So the next question is based around transformations or trends. You essentially outlined just in what you said there previously a complete transformation um, as it relates almost to, city planning and tourism and all of that. So feel free to dive deeper if you want to on that end, or maybe as it sits with restaurants or, fine dining or plant-based vegan. But like, what are some transformations or trends that you have noticed?
Yeah, I mean, for restaurants, it's been really, really tough through COVID and then inflation now, et cetera, et cetera. I think most independent restaurants are just trying to hang on. Avelo's doing okay. We're fortunate that we've had enough of a reputation from before COVID, and we built on that through that time. Um, but I've always wanted to do more than just a restaurant here or there. I've always been thinking about like how can this be a much bigger thing? So the projects in Costa Rica are kind of the evolution of that. So yeah, quite a, quite a big transformation there. Of course, it started in phases, like a couple of buildings at a time, um, and eventually build out the whole town. Um, yeah, the trends in the industry. I hear about, and I see this too, that there's more desire for deeper experiences rather than just like a hotel on the beach. You want to connect a little bit more, maybe with the culture, maybe with activities. So the idea of having the whole town be something that is very forward, very yeah, very, like a BHAG, big concepts. Yeah, I think that by itself would actually be a really big draw for people to come by. And then the evolution of our brand, going from providing meals for a few hours at a time to providing a whole experience for several days and really being able to connect more deeply with our guests. And yeah, just kind of showcasing even more what can be done with plant-based foods, of course, but also with if we think about how we interact with our environment. When I started um, planning this, I started thinking about there's talk about like colonizing Mars and what it would take to have sustainable living there and growing food, et cetera, et cetera. And that's like, so far away. But why don't we start looking at like can we make it sustainable here? Like, what if we started from scratch? Like, if we didn't have all the built up cities and everything, if you can move anywhere in the world, we would pick somewhere that you can grow food abundantly, where there's resources, where there's water, where we can be in touch with nature. We're wired to appreciate nature. We do better around nature. We're healthier physically and mentally. And and correcting mistakes that we've made, we wouldn't have things built around cars as the main use of land in a city. We wouldn't have half of the country just dedicated to cows. We do this, a little bit differently. Why don't we look at how we can make Earth sustainable first, and like take all these things that all these people have been thinking about for a very long time now, all these ideas, and really, really start actually doing them in a big way, in a bigger way.
A much bigger way. And I, for one, really appreciate your mention about the trend, or again, probably not a trend that it's going to come and go, but maybe more of a transformation about people having an appetite, pun intended, for more of a deeper experience. And to your point, in hearing you speak, in reading between the lines a little bit, I personally haven't had the opportunity to or the luxury to visit Costa Rica yet, but it sounds like honoring the locals, the people who are native to the land, the indigenous peoples there, like that would be important for this town instead of picking up a Canadian town, if you would, that's vegan and just dropping it somewhere in Costa Rica, but creating more of an immersive experience about this is actually where you are, this is where your feet are, this is the land, these are the people who came before you, and all of that. And oh, it just so happens to be absolutely amazing and vegan. And that just sounds great. It sounds great. Um, so no right or wrong answers. You can answer from it personally as Roger, maybe what has happened with Avelo in the past is maybe happening currently or something that's going to be happening in the future. But the next question is centered around giving back and charity. What have you done or what does that mean to you or your brand?
Yeah, we've I've been fortunate with both my first company and with Avelo. Um, my first company, like I mentioned, is on pretty solid financial footing. So we're able to donate to charity on a regular basis. Um, Mostly the staff who work there day to day decide on where that goes to, but we set aside a percentage of that. For Hawaii, the earlier restaurant, we were quite busy the first year, especially after that Toronto Star article came out. So for a while there, we were quite profitable, which is, not a small feat in this industry in restaurants in big cities. And yeah, so we were able to donate a good amount of money to a number of animal organizations and food security organizations. It's been tougher, of course, for restaurants. Now there's not really, not really much profit to be had there, but we're hoping to get back to that point in the near future.
Not to put you on the spot too much, but are there any particular organizations or causes that you'd like to sort of plug or give a shout out to?
Oh, um, yeah, there's so many. Like in Toronto, there's the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank. Um, there's a number of food banks, non-vegetarian food banks, and food security organizations. Um, I haven't been to many animal sanctuaries myself because I think I'm actually allergic to farm animals. I've had some bad experiences where I think I shouldn't be there, but I really appreciate that people are doing that kind of work. Um, I don't have the names off the top of my head, but yeah, I do really appreciate them.
Amazing. So at the beginning, you had mentioned, or we had briefly touched on how you had already made this lifestyle transformation in yourself. Then you started to learn more about it, and because you were already kind of there and all of that. So the next question is centered around like, what are some books, podcasts, or apps, or maybe other resources that you'd recommend to business owners or entrepreneurs, maybe related to vegan, maybe not, maybe related to leadership, mindset, setting big, hairy, audacious goals, anything like that. But do you have any books, apps, podcasts, or other resources that you'd recommend to business owners or entrepreneurs?
Yeah, for business things in particular, um, over the years, I've kind of shaped my thoughts on how to run a business and how to be successful. Um, and a lot of the books that influenced me focused on things like hiring the best people that you can, um, how to focus on supporting your top people. So, for example, Good to Great talks a lot about getting the right people on the bus and making sure in the right places, and then basically cultivating that environment for them to succeed. Another book I really liked is Drive, which goes into a lot about motivation. It's a little different from most of what we conventionally think of, like how people are motivated. So things like um, having autonomy in their jobs, I guess the opposite of being micromanaged, but going further than what we usually talk about. And I mean, as entrepreneurs, it's easy for us to understand how important that is. But I think most people do also appreciate having that level of autonomy, being able to do what they want to do. It's more fulfilling. Um, Another book that got me thinking more too about these topics is First Break All the Rules. And the thing that really stuck with me about that was how most managers focus on how to correct deficiencies, how to improve the uh, challenges that people have, and particularly the lower performing people, like the C players in your organization. And that can take a lot of time. And for um, just the way our brains work, there's just certain things that are challenging to improve. Like for example, for myself, one of my weaknesses, I have a short attention span. I could spend like years trying to improve that. It's just not really going to be very helpful though. It's just kind of a waste of time. So instead, what can I do to, make it so that that lack of lack of attention span isn't so much of an issue? Like, how can I have other people help me with that? How can I set up my systems that that doesn't become a challenge? And then focus on top players and their strengths and how to make those strengths even better, how to help them hone that. Because ultimately, your business or organization is all about people, and you want the best possible people doing their best possible work because that determines the success of the organization.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for those recommendations. Now, this next question, some folks have talked about philosophically what inspiration means to them. Other folks have given specific organizations, individuals. They've even mentioned themselves and the life of an entrepreneur and how challenging that is. And when they look back, how they themselves are an inspiration to continue. So that's the question. It's centered around inspiration, whether you want to, you know, tell us what inspiration means to you or how you source it.
Yeah, I do find talking to other entrepreneurs, especially people doing very innovative things, especially people doing things in plant-based foods and sustainability. I find that very inspiring. Um, I mean, I can only get so much out of my own head, but it's interesting to see other people's perspectives. Other people are doing things in that kind of area. So yeah, I'm really glad to be in this on this interview and being able to connect with people. Um, and more recently, I've been thinking a lot more about all the systems in nature. Um, like I've always appreciated nature, of course, and the vastness of the complexities and all these things that we as humans only have so much understanding of. But the more I'm thinking about um, a whole environment, a whole town that can be sustainable, and how humans can live um, more more in line with nature, and thinking about all these systems, like yeah, I think I appreciate trees way more than I did before. Like just lining up all of these benefits from trees, and like wow, I mean I knew all these things before, but I didn't really think about it that much. But then when thinking about like how this can improve our living spaces and like all these things that they do for us, like that is really inspiring. It's like, wow, we should really pay more attention to to all these amazing things in nature.
Yeah, the I don't know how to explain it, but I guess like the delicate balance, if you would, of like the complexity, but how it under everything it's incredibly complex, but then how it manifests is just like so simple and just
Yeah.
fits and just makes so much sense. Like that's fascinating, inspiring, and all of that. And also the the routine or the seasons of it and how it just continues to come and go. It's anyways, I could go on and on about that. That makes um okay, Roger. So we are finally here at the end of the conversation with one last conversation starter question for you. And frame it as advice if you would. Other people don't like framing it as such. They'd rather frame it as lessons, tips, wisdom that they've learned along the way that they're happy to share. And if others pick up something from it, great. But the question is sort of, do you have any advice, lessons, or tips for business owners or entrepreneurs?
Um, Yeah, I think in terms of scaling a business and growing a sustainable business, I mean, in terms of operations and everything, I think those books I talked about and the concepts I got out of that, I think those are some of the most powerful things that I've learned that I would recommend if you haven't already to check those out. But yeah, I think when I look back at years of entrepreneurialism, um, I think about if I think if I had known how challenging it can be and all the constant things that you run into, I don't know if I would have done it. There's like it's kind of like this irrational optimism that's required in order to be an entrepreneur, to just get into it. Like a lot of people say, like, oh yeah, I'd love to have a business, but most people never actually do it. So that's required. And then to sustain that too, you kind of have to be a little out there. And I think at the beginning I didn't quite understand that as much, and but now I do, and I think I appreciate that, and I appreciate what it takes for myself and other entrepreneurs to actually do this, and yeah, that it's more fulfilling overall. I haven't really spent much time working for other people, but I can't imagine working a regular job compared to doing your own thing and building new things.
Well, I for one saw some heads nodding for those of us who are listening to it live. And the reason I think why is because we've heard that common thread with a few folks that we've talked with about if I knew what was involved, I probably wouldn't have done it. And it speaks to the age-old just do it quote and say yes and figure out the rest later and don't try and inundate yourself with trying to have it perfect, progress over perfection. So I think that that's a great sentiment to sort of end on. One last question for you from a branding standpoint. Maybe there's a big story behind it, maybe not, but we'll ask it anyway. What is the story behind the name Avelo?
Yeah, so Avelo actually means hazelnut in Esperanto. So on this little townhouse on the street, there's a row of townhouses, and each one has a little block with the name on it. So ours says Hazel Cottage. And since a lot of the experience is about the space itself and the service and the level of intimacy, we decided to focus on the name on the brand on the space itself on the building. So our chef actually who came up with that name, um, yeah, we spent quite a long time trying to think of like what should we call this, something unique, something yeah, and then Avelo came out and it just sounded right and it just made so much sense.
Well, suffice to say, maybe the town is going to be called Avelo. Maybe Costa Rica will be a great place for hazelnut trees and people will just be able to walk around. And I think you said hazelnut, right?
Yeah, hazelnut, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, very interesting. So, Roger, is there anything that came up in today's conversation with us here that you'd like to go back to and double down on? Maybe anything that we missed that you'd like to address and or any announcements that you might have?
I think we covered quite a bit, and it was a good format, and yeah, I think I managed to say everything I wanted to. Um, just that for these new projects, I'll be looking for people who are interested in participating in some way, whether it's investing or um, moving down to Costa Rica, or maybe just coming for a vacation. But yeah, I'm starting to look for contacts to yeah, to get more people involved in it, to get more feedback, more opinions. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any thoughts on that.
Wonderful. Well, there's probably a lot of people listening who absolutely love Costa Rica, whether they're maybe even digital nomads working there right now, or that's somewhere that they frequent. So make sure that you do tap in with Roger to talk more about that. You can find out more about what's going on in Toronto at Avelo Restaurant. The website is avelorestaurant.com. Avelo is spelled Avelo. So it's avelorestaurant.com. And on Instagram, you can check out more at avelo.restaurant on Instagram, avelo.restaurant. So this has been another great conversation with the founder of Avelo Restaurant. We were speaking today with Roger Yang. Thank you, Roger, for joining us. Everybody who's here with us live, thank you for joining us. And everybody who's listening on your own time, thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you soon on another episode of Veg Networking Canada. Take care and bye for now.
Bye, everybody.